Have you ever sat down to start a paper crafting project only to realize you're missing a tool or using something that just doesn't work the way you want? Or maybe you wasted money buying fancy tools that end up sitting in a drawer because they don't actually make your crafting any easier. Well, today I'm breaking down the 15 basic paper crafting tools that every crafter actually needs and are my favorites. And the best part, they're affordable, they work, and they'll completely transform your project starting today. Let's dive in. The first set of tools are absolute lifelines for me when it comes to having a functional and organized workspace so I can be efficient with my crafting process. I've tried to group all the tools under different categories and aren't necessarily listed in my order of preference. Now, the Salmon Says Stamp magnetic glass mat is hands down one of my most used tools. It gives me a smooth, heat-resistant surface that's perfect for card assembly, gluing, ink blending, and color layering. Here you're watching me use the glass mat as a palette. I want to apply a blue ink over the leaves that I've already colored with green. The sticky mat already has a lot of green on it, so if I use my blending brush and pick up color directly from the blue ink pad, it's surely going to get contaminated by the greens. But if I smoosh the ink pad onto my glass mat and then dip the brush in it, that will keep my blues and greens separate. These are neodymium magnets and they are extremely strong, which help keep my card panels and other design elements in place on the glass mat, especially when I'm assembling and gluing them down. It's also a fabulous tool for ink blending or stenciling, and cleanup is super easy. Just use water or rubbing alcohol if you have sticky substance on it, and it looks brand new again. Now here's another one of my favorite sets of tools, the Spellbinders craft stacks. These are so handy for project prep. Let's say I'm going to use this die and this embossing folder. I just pop them into one of the boxes. The craft stacks are stackable and you can even flip the lid to use it like a tray, which is super convenient. Each set comes with 4 small boxes, although I seem to have misplaced the 4th one somewhere in my messy craft room, but you get the idea. They're perfect when I'm prepping or die cutting. I just toss everything that belongs to one project into one or more of these craft stacks and stack them up. They are really compact and they stay put. I absolutely love how much they've helped me stay organized, especially when I'm filming these videos. Now, let me show you another favorite tool, this die catcher that I keep on my desk. It's magnetic and super handy, especially when I'm working with small dies. Sometimes when I'm working quickly, I don't have time to put everything back in its proper storage. So I just pop the dies onto this magnetic pad and they stay put. The grip is strong and even the sides are magnetic. So if I lose little dies on my desktop, it automatically attracts them and they are all stuck to the pad. I have stopped losing dies since I started using this pad. But if one slips and falls out of my hands or something, I run one of these heavy-duty magnets over the area. Look at how far I can hold it and it still catches the die. This is at least about 1.5 inches away. It's amazing. It just helps me stay organized and keeps those tiny dies from disappearing into the abyss. All right, another one of my recent favorite tools is my Laminator. It's honestly so much fun to use. Mine came with a little trimmer, some binder rings, a corner punch, a hole punch, and even a spare blade for the trimmer. What I love about it is that it's helping me stay organized and stretching my supplies. For example, I made these cute little bookmarks using the Laminator. I also created a stencil or a mask, depending on how you look at it, again using the Laminator. I've used it for swatching my inks and my cardstock. And then check out these storage folders. Amazing, right? I've been using them to store my stamps and dies and scraps. Super easy to make with the Laminator. Here are a couple more pouches. This one holds all my vellum scraps. I also use the Laminator to make these masks and stencils like the ones I just showed you earlier. These are great alternatives for DIY stenciling. I actually demonstrated 13 hacks in one of my recent videos, so I'll link that in the description as well. So definitely check that out if you're curious. Honestly, this tool has helped me start getting more organized because I can make my own custom storage solutions, tools, and gifts all at once. Now, let's move on to my favorite cutting tools and I'll explain the reason why they are my favorite. Next up is the guillotine trimmer from Tonic Studios. We all use it to cut card panels, right? But here's a tip you might not know. You can actually use the plastic finger guard to help align your sentiment strips perfectly. I picked up this trick from Kathy Zilski and it's been a game changer. Watch this. I'm lining up the bottom of my sentiment with the edge of the plastic guard. Then I'll trim it. Now I'll turn it around and line it up again the same way for the bottom. And when I cut it, you'll see the top and bottom borders are perfectly uniform. I'll do the same for the sides. Just line it up with the guard, trim carefully, and look at that. Perfect margins all around. This is such a simple trick, but it really elevates the look of your sentiment labels. Now, I have an array of scissors here, and I'm grouping them together with my cutting and placement tools because let's face it, when you cut something, you almost always need to place it somewhere, right? So I'm going with that theme for this section. This first one is my craft knife, which is super helpful, especially when I'm working with washi tape. I reach for it often for those clean precision cuts. Now, this is currently my absolute favorite pair of scissors. They're by Spellbinders, they're non-stick and super smooth. I even use them for fussy cutting. I've used them for intricate details and they really did well. But I'll show you my detailed scissors in a second. I have a separate pair of scissors I picked up from Amazon. I use these strictly for cutting sticky stuff like adhesive strips and foam tape. Always keep your scissors for adhesives separate from your paper cutting ones. That way your main pair doesn't get gunky. This one here is from scrapbook.com and it's ergonomic, which is great for fussy cutting since I have arthritis and traditional scissors can put too much pressure on my fingers. I use this one for fussy cutting when I need more comfort and it actually does a pretty good job. But for very fine detail, I still need to go in with one of these smaller detail scissors. You absolutely don't need as many scissors, but you do need 3. One for adhesives, one for paper in general, and one for detailed fussy cutting. Now, let's talk tweezers. This pair here is basically my lifeline for heat embossing or gluing things. I like to keep my fingers away from the card front so I can see what I'm doing while aligning things precisely and of course keep the glue off my fingers as well. This next one is a reverse tweezer, also from Amazon. So instead of squeezing to hold something, you squeeze to open and it holds on to your item when you release. It's perfect when you're using a heat tool and want to keep your fingers away from the heat and also great for tying bows. This isn't something I reach for too often since I use the regular tweezers most of the time, but it definitely has its uses. Now, this little tool here is from Salmon Says Stamp, used for picking up small pieces like die cuts or embellishments. Honestly, I couldn't live without this, especially when I'm placing sequins or tiny elements. Next up is my beloved Spellbinders Platinum 6. This is absolutely one of my most used tools because I do a lot of die cutting and this machine cuts beautifully. It's also the only machine that works with my BetterPress system. And if you've seen my videos before, you've probably watched me use that system. It's just such a joy to work with because it creates incredibly sharp impressions. Now, I do want to add a little disclaimer. I don't have the Spellbinders Glimmer hot foil machine. I used to use a Gemini Junior because the electric machines make die cutting easier with less effort. But my Gemini Junior is in a really awkward spot in my craft room, so switching my camera setup to film hot foiling with it is pretty inconvenient. That's why you don't see much hot foiling in my videos. One day I'll figure out a better filming setup for the Gemini Junior so I can show you foiling in action. But for now, I mostly use my Platinum 6. It's consistent, the pressure is just right, and the cuts and embossing are flawless. For anyone using the Gemini Junior, I'll link to a set of plates I found that don't warp after a couple of uses. Honestly, that was a game changer for me when I was still using it regularly. And of course, like I mentioned, you can use the Plat 6 with 3D embossing folders and standard embossing folders. With the Spellbinders Platinum 6, embossing is a breeze and the outcome is stunning. Now, let me introduce you to my favorite adhesives and a game-changing tool in my toolbox. One of my absolute favorite dry adhesives is the tape runner. You'll often see me using it, especially when I'm working with my BetterPress system and pattern papers. That makes it perfect when I'm just trying something out or working with thin paper or cardstock like pattern paper. If I use a liquid glue on thin paper, the moisture might cause warping or buckling, and that would ruin the card. Now, this tape runner goes on temporary, but after a few minutes, it actually becomes permanent. So if I misalign something and need to reposition, I still have time to peel it off gently. It's great for trying out different designs or layouts without committing right away. Now, here's my most used tool. Ready? Ta-da! If you're wondering what this is, it's a scrap piece of cardstock, and I picked up this hack from BB Cameron. Life-changing. I use it in combination with my favorite liquid glue, which is Barely Art Precision Craft Glue. It comes with this amazing ultra-fine tip, which is a lifesaver for detailed applications. Sure, I could apply it directly to my project, but when I'm working with delicate die cuts or thin edges and they come loose, it's not always ideal to lift them up and apply glue underneath because they might tear or become misshapen. Instead, I just squirt a bit of glue onto this cardstock scrap and slide the corner beneath the loose edge. That way, the glue goes exactly where I need it. I call this my slide test. If I can slide this piece of cardstock under a layer that should be adhered, I know it needs glue. And once it passes the slide test, I know it's good to go. Sometimes I do intentionally leave edges unglued for dimension, but where it needs to be secure, this method is perfect. Here's another absolute favorite, press and seal. Yes, the kitchen wrap. I learned this trick from Jennifer Maguire, and it is a game changer. Incidentally, it was Jennifer's husband who invented the press and seal, and I can guarantee millions around the world thank him for it in the kitchen, and hundreds of thousands of crafters thank Jennifer for showing us this trick. So the way I use it is I cut small pieces of press and seal and keep them in my drawer. When I'm creating card layouts, especially floral arrangements, this helps me hold everything in place. So say I've arranged a few die cuts on my card front, and I've got the perfect layout. The minute I try to glue them, they move, right? Press and seal to the rescue. You just take a piece, sticky side down, and place it over your arrangement. One thing to watch out for is static cling, especially in drier climates. To prevent shifting, just anchor one edge first, then gently drop the rest of the sheet over the top and press it down firmly. Now, when you lift it up, everything stays in place. You can flip it over, apply adhesive to the back, and then place it back on your card front. Let the glue set for a few seconds, then peel off the wrap. That's it. Nothing moves, and you don't have to recreate the whole layout again. If you've seen my card making hacks video, you've already seen this in action. I'll link it for you in the description below. And if you don't have press and seal, you can always take a photo of your arrangement with your phone, then recreate it by referencing the picture. As you all know, the primary reason to use a stamp positioner is for precision stamping, especially when you need to stamp the same image multiple times. That's something you really can't do with an acrylic block. This is where my MISTI comes in. This looks pretty good overall. I'm not pressing down too hard on the stamps, but I do want to make sure everything's coming through clearly. I can already see the middle impression isn't great, so I'll go ahead and stamp it again. And honestly, this is a perfect example of why a MISTI is so useful. You can restamp in exactly the same spot as many times as you want. This next tool is an absolute favorite of mine, especially when I'm ink blending or stenciling. I know I keep saying my favorite, but honestly, the tools I'm demonstrating to you are my favorites. I mean, there are a ton of tools that I haven't really included in this video, but this one is an Altenew grip mat, and as you can probably tell, it's well loved. I use it a lot, and I do try to take good care of my tools by cleaning them as soon as possible after each use. This mat comes with acetate sheets to protect the surface, and you need to remove them before you use. It does create a bit of traction on my work surface, but I love placing this mat directly on my magnetic glass mat and grabs onto my glass mat so it remains stable while I'm ink blending. This combo works beautifully. Once it's down, it grips the glass so well it's not budging. It's possibly vacuum sealing it a little bit, but it also has a natural tackiness that makes it cling to the surface because this material is the same as a photopolymer stamp. And that's part of what makes it so great for stenciling and ink blending. Now, let me give you a quick demo. Once I have the grip mat in place, I simply lay my cardstock on top. It stays put perfectly. And the best part is when I place my stencil over it, it sticks too, without any extra tape or magnets. I know this piece isn't cut exactly the size, but you get the idea. I'll grab some ink and start blending. As you can see, I'm using a decent amount of pressure here and nothing is moving. I'm not even holding the stencil down with my hand. Hands-free blending, which is so convenient. I love using my Spellbinders blending brushes for this. Just look how quickly I can get even coverage. Now let's lift this up. I can feel the slight tack from the mat, but it pulls away cleanly. Honestly, I think this is one of the best ways to do stenciling and ink blending. Just stick everything down and go. It's super easy and efficient. And cleaning the mat is simple too. You can just spray a little water and wipe it with a cloth, or even easier, use a baby wipe. Some inks will stain a bit, like the pinks, reds, and purples, but oxide inks are water soluble, so they usually don't leave a stain. It's the dye inks that tend to stain more. One last tip. If you ever feel like the mat isn't gripping your work surface as well as it used to, chances are the back has picked up some dust or fibers. That's totally normal. Just give the bottom a good clean. I did that a couple of days ago and now it's grabbing my glass mat perfectly again. It's not going anywhere. And that's it. Super handy, super reliable, and one of my absolute go-to tools in the craft room. While on the topic of ink blending, I have to show you my Spellbinders brushes. I purchased them a few months ago and I'm in love. These make for stunning ink blending, especially for card backgrounds, as the larger brushes offer great coverage while being easy on the hands, especially for my arthritis. These are so good for creating smooth ink blended backgrounds. Just look how beautiful this is. Honestly, it's all about having the right blending tools. And if you're interested, I have some ink blending videos that I'll link in the description below. You can check them out to see more techniques in action. I didn't have these brushes back then, but you'll see me test the outcome of ink blending with various inks and papers. All right, so this is another one of my essential crafting tools, and I'm going to show you exactly how I use it. Now, I've had this heat tool for a very long time. Of course, you know the heat tool is mainly used for heat embossing, but it's also perfect for drying your ink blended or watercolored pieces, and I'm going to show you one more trick that I absolutely love. If you ever end up with a card panel that's a little skewed, maybe the foam tape didn't line up properly, you can use your heat tool to gently loosen it without damaging anything. I discovered this as an accident when I was heat embossing on an already adhered panel, and I suddenly saw the panel come loose. And I realized that the panel had come off so cleanly that this would be a huge hack that could save me a ton of card fronts. I'm saving this card to reuse, so I don't want to remove the entire strip. But with just a little bit of heat, you can already see how easily the foam starts to lift. And if I continued, the entire strip would peel right off. This is such a great way to fix alignment issues without destroying your card front if you've somehow glued it down wrong. Full disclosure, I've never tried with pieces that are adhered with liquid glue, but it works like a charm with foam strips. It's one of my favorite heat tool hacks, especially when you want to rescue a panel you worked hard on. Now let me show you the next tool. Since I already have a heat emboss sentiment here, it's the perfect time to talk about it. This is the Mono Sand Eraser, and honestly, it's one of those tools every crafter should have in their stash. Take a look at the sentiment panel. I purposely left a bit of stray embossing powder before heat setting it so I could show you what it does. It's now fully heat embossed, including the little specks of embossing powder that I intentionally left behind. All I'm going to do now is take my Mono Sand Eraser and gently rub over the areas where the stray embossing is. And just like that, you can barely tell there was ever any embossing mishap. It works incredibly well, especially with ink too. If you've ever accidentally touched your card front with inky fingers, the eraser can help fix that as well. And by the way, I didn't show this in my video, but you can use this to fix overfoiling if you're hot foiling your card designs. So now I can absolutely use the sentiment panel. No need to toss it out. The Mono Sand Eraser is a fantastic little rescue tool for stray embossing powder, ink smudges, and overfoiling. Definitely a must-have for your craft toolkit. Alright, so for the last one, of course, this is my scoring board, and it's definitely one of my favorite tools. Naturally, it's meant for scoring, right? But let me explain why I still reach for it, even though I mostly use pre-made card bases. I usually get those on Amazon and they come pre-scored. So you might be thinking, Tony, why do you even need a scoring board then? Well, the main reason is I love making fun fold cards. For example, here's a stepper card. You can see it has multiple folds and panels, and for something like this, I absolutely need a scoring board to create those folds accurately. And there's another one I made recently. It's a gift card holder, which is another type of fun fold. You'll find the video for that on my channel as well. Again, that kind of project definitely needs a scoring tool to get those precise fold lines. So yes, it's for basic scoring, but I also use it in a different way. Let's say I'm adhering a card front to a card base and I want it perfectly aligned. I'll use my scoring board. I'll tuck both the base and the card front into the corner so they're flush against the sides. That gives me a perfect alignment every time. So while it may seem like just a basic tool, I actually get a lot of versatility out of it, from fun folds to helping with alignment, and that's why it's still a go-to in my craft room. By the way, if you're curious about the laminator hacks I referred to earlier in this video, you should check out that video here.